Hello, and thanks for coming along to And We Have an Office Dog, the digital agency podcast where we talk to agency owner-directors and learn more about what makes them tick. From the things that make them similar to the things they'd rather have known sooner, where they've had success and where they've learned some hard lessons. All will be revealed with your host, Chris Simmons, the agency coach, and he'll be talking to a different awesome agency person in each episode, asking them 4 questions and seeing where the conversation takes us over the next 25 minutes. Okay, so let us begin. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, voiceover guy. And on the podcast today, we've got Andy, the CEO of Adido. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you very much. Good to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No trouble at all. No trouble at all. So first and foremost, we've had this conversation just before we went live. It's pronounced Adido.
Yep.
I sounded like an idiot when we came on. I was trying to get it right, saying Adido, which sounds stupider the more I listen to myself. But you also, you were just saying that your kids are better at the English language than you, and they've actually told you that even you pronounce it wrong. So
yes, yeah, English is a very strange language when you start looking at how it's comprised and how we do actually say things. So don't feel bad at all.
Just imagine writing a couple of meta descriptions and not knowing what you're saying. So the first and foremost, this is a really good opportunity for you to give Adido a plug. Tell us what you do best, what's your superpowers, things like that.
Sure. So yeah, we are Adido. We are, I guess, what you'd call a full service digital agency, but the way we describe ourselves is being very, very commercially focused, and we help commercially focused businesses achieve more from their marketing or website spend. And that's really about building better websites, improving digital marketing approaches and processes, and putting really good measurement in place to understand how all those metrics work. Which I guess is a lot of agencies do, but we are very, very commercially driven and we hate fluff. So we're very candid about how we work and the way we do things. Yeah,
I think the woolliness can come from a lot of agencies where they know how to do the services, but they're not sure why they're doing the services. And quite a lot of the time, if you, like you say, if you're commercial focused, then you get how a business runs, and then the marketing a bit is just about the audience and the people, and then just the delivery, making sure that it actually matches what the business is trying to do. I can't tell you, I'm sure you can you've got examples of this, but I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people in the past when I was running the agency to say, what was it, what's your budget, and they'd say, oh, I don't know, you tell us what it will cost. And we're like, well, it's not so much about that. We need to know what you need out of it and how much. What are you looking on a cost per acquisition basis? How are you trying to solve the square the circle of we need to spend some money in order to get some return? What's the return you need? And I'll be able to tell you how we can get there. How many times do you get there and they go, that's too expensive, or I didn't know it was going to cost this much, or how did you get to that number? Well, you run the business, mate, so you should know how you should know your numbers.
Far too often they don't, and we've been doing this for 20 years roughly, and frankly I'm fed up with those conversations. And my qualification a lot these days is, should you be doing this, yes or no? I would tell you whether you shouldn't. We've had a few pitches in the last week, and they say, well, could we just do some SEO? Like, how much can we spend on SEO? And I'm like, you don't need to do SEO. You need to get this right and do SEO once you've figured that out. And secondly, like, if they can't tell me the budget or they don't have any clue about their own measures, then again, I'll qualify them out, because it's not worth my team's time, which is quite precious, to put those ideas in front of you if actually you don't know yourself. So we are being a bit harder on that, and I think that means we get better opportunities, which hopefully convert. So let's see.
And I think with all agencies, there's that thing where it's super hard, really, to sort of say no sometimes, and it's very hard. And I think you get better at it over time, especially when you know what clients work and especially work for your agency. Yeah. So what do you think over the last almost 20 years, you say, that has been one of the biggest successes of running Adido?
I mean, there have been many, to be honest. And
I hope so. 20 years.
Just one. I guess the biggest one was turning the company around I say it wasn't me, it was the whole team, but we were 40 odd people for a number of years and very big and very well known, particularly in Dorset. But we ran into some trouble in 2015, 2016. Effectively, we've been growing too fast. We didn't have enough money in the bank. We made quite a few bad decisions. And at one point, we had negative equity. We owed the bank lots of money. We owed people money. And through loan, through a bit of fudging, through a bit of goodwill, we managed to get through that. And we went down from like 40 down to 15, and we've stayed about 20 for the last 3 or 4 years. But we've managed to build the company out of debt with the clients that we've managed to retain and grow the business slightly. But we've grown the profit exponentially from where we've historically been. So I guess that's probably the biggest thing of growth, drop and loss and nearly crashing, and then rebirth and coming out the other side.
It's I mean, first of all, credit to you for being honest about that, because it's really hard for as an agency owner to say those sorts of things. It's another thing entirely to come out of that sort of thing from that kind of, like you say, the growth, the crash, the rebirth. The rebirth has obviously been quite successful, but I think it's feast and famine when it comes to agency sometimes. And sometimes when you're starting out and everything's growing, the feast keeps going because you've got a marketing machine, but systems and processes and cash in the bank are the things that keep it going. If you don't have all of the systems and the processes for the people that you're throwing in the door and the cash in the bank to cash flow all of the other stuff, it's a ticking time bomb, I guess. And
that's what it was for us. Cash caught up with us in the end because we'd spent a lot of it and trying to restructure. We hadn't really got enough in the bank to do the big thing that we wanted to do, and because you don't have enough money in the bank, you're then constantly frustrated, and you're trying to do new things that might work, and they don't then work because you haven't invested enough and you haven't given enough time, which then means you don't have enough cash, and so you end up in this semi-vicious cycle of trying to do things you shouldn't be doing, but you feel like you have to try and get to the next stage. And in hindsight, we should have gone from 40. We shouldn't have been at 40, number one, but we probably should have gone from like 30 back to 25 to then regrow rather than just kept adding headcount, because that's what agencies do, and being a bit more strategic. But when you're, when you've been doing it for 10 years and you're, you think everything is success, you don't think like that. And so it's a hard lesson.
It is. I guess the thing is learning from it, and that comes with maturity of running a business. I think not to suggest that you rebrand, but you ought to think about calling yourself the Phoenix Agency, perhaps.
Well, I try and give my time to other agency owners who are in those similar places, and just say, look, stop, take a step back, downsize, whatever it is, because just growth for growth's sake, I think, is absolute bullshit and gets peddled a lot in the agency world, unfortunately. And people just feel like the only way they can be successful is by having another 10 staff. And I think that's complete bollocks.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a strange thing. When you go to conferences and things like that, you get people say, "Oh, what do you do?" You say, "I run an agency." One of the first things they ask is, "How many people do you have?" Not that many, but really profitable, thanks.
Well, quite boring actually. But never mind.
It's a really boring agency. You've never heard of us. Don't worry about it. But we're really good. Our clients know about us. We don't need to have this conversation. Do you want a beer? Yes, please. Thanks. Bye.
And that's what I mean. I got sucked. I think we got sucked into that world. And these agency groups are great, but you do feel there's a lot of ego that goes around with it. And if you get sucked into it, it's very sometimes hard to go, well, we just grew by one person last year, and I just feel a bit embarrassed by it.
Yeah, I got suckered into it essentially in a similar way years ago, and it wasn't until I realised that actually I'm pretty lazy. So it wasn't until I got to the point where I was like going through another hiring process, I was like, I think there's a different way of doing this. This isn't success. I feel like I'm miserable doing this. This isn't successful. And I think when I do the agency mastermind sessions or any of the work with any of the agencies that I spend time with, the key part is like, just no bullshit. We all know that we all have the same problems. We all know that if we're honest about it, we'll be able to help each other better. And if you're in a group with people who you know are honest, you're going to be more likely to show your vulnerability and things like that. And I think it's really important to do. But then again, you look on Twitter for 30 seconds and you immediately feel like you've got to pump your chest out and start being a bit bullshit. I mean, if you could go back in time though to 20 years ago when you were starting the agency, what if physics notwithstanding, if you could go back in time, what one piece of advice would you give to yourself?
I think it's probably just what we've touched upon, which is cash is king, really. And if you have cash in the bank, it gives you freedom. And I think, particularly in our early days, sales was again particularly hard. It's always hard. Trying to win clients is very tricky, particularly when, as we were 22 and out of university and didn't know what the hell we were doing, frankly. That was very tricky. But by not having enough, I guess this comes into like then billable hours and charging the right amount, etc., all things we were very naive to. But if we didn't have the cash in the bank, then it was very, very hard to feel like you have freedom. And I think that's again why we're in this position now where we can say no to some clients, is because we don't need to go and win the next piece of business for paying the bills. And so if you can build up that reserve, it does gives you the opportunity to be more selective, go to different things, invest. And again, it's probably a very boring thing, but cash is king. And I've learned the hard way that if you take your eye off that ball, then you're in a bad place.
Yeah, I mean, let's not lie. It sounds really boring, but it's the engine that drives the business. The people are the people are driving the car down the road to wherever you need to go, but without the cash, which is fueling that engine, you're not going to get anywhere. And ultimately, like you say, it comes back to bite you. Do you think if you looked at yourself 20 years ago and you gave yourself that advice, do you think you'd have even listened to it though?
No, because when you're 22 and you think, what does all these old farts know? It's very hard to listen. And I guess that's a lot of businesses. People have got the expertise and the knowledge. I guess what you're doing is, well, I've done all these mistakes. Let me tell you what not to do. And you just need to hopefully open your ears and listen and have a taste of it. Because I think it's probably a thing we didn't have in the early days, is that agency support. There wasn't anything really around like you do, like agency collector, agency hackers. I mean, there's lots of them now, which are great. And so hopefully people can listen to their peers rather than some guy that's 30 years older than them that doesn't really know exactly what you do. I think one of the things that is and you kind of just suggested it by saying you wouldn't really have listened to your own advice, is that I can sit there and pontificate and coach and mentor and give some advice and give a bunch of templates, but it's for the person who's listening to actually be ready to hear it. And there's sometimes where I have a bit of a chemistry session with an agency owner or a co-founders, and you get the feeling that they're not quite ready to act on it. It's a lot of nodding and that sounds great, but actually you've got to be ready to listen and act on it. And it's very easy, and quite a lot of agency coaches will take those people on, put them through a 6-month program, and at the end of it go, well, you just didn't do it, that's why it didn't work. Well, they weren't ready for it yet. You shouldn't have taken their money.
When someone asks for advice or support, then they're ready, or usually they're ready at least.
So I think so, a bit like when we are pitching to clients, if they have had some pain in the past, I think it then helps make better decisions. And I guess similar in the agency world of, well, I've tried that and I nearly went bust, or we hired the wrong person. Having that pain and something to learn from is very, very valuable. I don't think there's any lessons that are ever lost. It's just different ways of looking at it.
If you've got a potential client that you've gone to directly, you've outreached directly to them, and they didn't know you from Adam beforehand. The sales are a lot harder because they're not ready. If they've come to you and they said, we know we've got a problem here, we're not sure what it is, can you help? Then they're ready to listen. It's the same with agency folk, and we're like naturally pig-headed because we were silly enough to start agencies. So you've got to have something wrong with you, and it's going to take a lot longer to get it through your head. So beyond the cash is king, and kind of going through the growth, drop, grow, sort of cycle. What's one thing that you kind of learned that you've either taken on as a lesson or learned that works really well and then used it up to now as I don't know, you learned it the hard way for future success style type thing?
Again, I mean, I'm probably coming at this from a slightly boring angle, but I have run the finances for the last 20 years, so I'm
starting to sound like an accountant, Andy.
I know, well, it's the blue shirt I'm wearing today. But no, really, like setting the targets, having clarity on them, and then we've evolved a system which is, again, not very glamorous, but uses Google Sheets, which are all linked together to piece together if I win this piece of work, but when it's going to be invoiced and when my cash hits the bank. And I've got that system and overview. And by having the targets very, very clear, it drives the right behavior in terms of like, are we winning work that helps us to hit our target? And if we do hit that target, then what does that mean for staff? And I guess looking at things holistically rather than just sort of going, well, I need to drive sales, or my team are really efficient, but then are they doing the right work, and all these different things that are there. So I think taking that step back, having that top level view as simply as you can. I mean, again, the last 20 years systems have evolved so much, but I don't know any agency that uses one system for everything. Everyone's got a hodgepodge of about 15 things. So just try to find a way that works, that gives you that top level view of, are we on course to where we need to be? Have we set the right targets? Are the targets aligned to where me as a business owner, agency owner actually wants to be? Going back to what you were saying before, do I want to grow 100%, or am I quite happy growing my bottom line by 10%? And having that clarity, reviewing it very regularly, and making sure, again, you're looking at those metrics as the business owner rather than the creative or the senior SEO guy or whatever it is. Taking that, I guess, more mature, more grown-up view of it, because I think agency owners start as something, they do very good work as a designer or as an architect or a developer, but then you have to put yourself in the business owner position to not do those things, and that's again a transition you have to go through.
And that's, again, it's a really hard thing, because when you start, you know what you're doing. You're really good at whatever it is that you started your agencies based on.
And people will come to you and they'll give you referrals, and great, and I've gone from me and now it's 3 of us, brilliant. But now, you can't be doing the work. You need to get other people to do the work, and letting go is a very hard skill to have, I think.
Totally agree. So if there's someone who's listening to this podcast right now and they're looking to start an agency tomorrow or this year, and they've been waiting all the way through this podcast, they're not interested in any of the stuff we've just talked about. They're just waiting for this one piece of advice from you.
Oh God.
What is it? Assuming they're ready to listen.
I think, on reflection, this is something I'm looking at or thinking about certainly a lot in even with Adidos. How do you get to be the best in the world? I had a chat with another agency owner last week, and I know that Peter Chap from the Well Companies talked about this quite a bit. How do you become not necessarily the best in the world, but one of the best in your field at a certain thing? And when I talk about us, we are very commercially driven as an agency, but I'm sure there are 100 of other agencies that say exactly the same thing. Is there an opportunity for you to be the best web designer for glass manufacturers? Is there an opportunity for you to be the best social media company for second-hand cars, or something like that, where there is enough scale and enough opportunity, but most agencies and most businesses are not focused on that really specific niche? And I think there's an opportunity, or if I was going to start tomorrow, I would pick a thing that I like, B, I'm interested in, B, and C, there's enough volume and opportunity in it to go, right, I'm going to be the best in the world at this thing, or I'm going to focus specifically on this. We've tried this in Adido. We are very travel driven. We are very, so we've got a lot of history, a lot of heritage in travel and tourism. We also do a lot in the sort of finance sector. And I think those are the 2 things we've always tried to major on. But if I was starting tomorrow with a blank piece of paper, I would just go, right, we only do credit card promotion in Facebook or something like that. Because I think if you can get a reputation, some of those sectors and they're very small. People just job hop from different company to company. They'll bring in with you. They'll get worried about, they've got the best in the world at this. We need to get involved, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you can create a very good process-driven approach that you can probably charge the premium for, which other people are not looking at.
Well, often if you're the one that is the go-to, your name is synonymous with a thing, a niche, or a type of service, then you can charge more, because why wouldn't you? People are expecting the best, because they've told you that been told you the best. But equally, it's kind of a smaller pond to fish in, because there's less of them. But you don't need all of them, and you don't need all of everyone either. So if you look at it and you think, well, what are the goals of this business? Well, the goals are to make this net profit amount every year for the next 20 years. That's all I want, or whatever it might be. How do I do that? Well, I need 8 staff maximum, and I need 8 staff at a decent salary rate, which means that I need to be earning this amount of money from this amount, which then means the average amount of client value is £2,000 a month. So we need 32 clients. And then you say, right,
and there may be 600 in this industry, so I need 5% of them, and if I can get 2 a month for the next 18 months, job done. Well, it sounds very, very simple.
It's really easy.
We're going to start tomorrow, Chris. Come on, me and you.
Yeah, all right. Oh God, no, thank you. I'm never going back. I've got PTSD from running agencies. That's why I do what I do, because it's, like you say, learned all of the lessons the hard way, in a sense. It's the most expensive MBA I think I've ever had, but at the same time, it's something which there's very few agency coaches out there that have run an actual agency, and then of those that have run an actual agency, they ran them like 5 or 10 years ago. So kind of being fresh out of the trenches and running an agency coaching business means that I can talk to you, and we can talk on the same level about the same types of problems in the same type of industry, knowing how it works. And that's like when you're on one side of the fence, a bit like a therapist's probably got their own mental health issues, but they're there to help you because they know how to help you. So I'm rocking in the corner on my own.
Right, we're here for you. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. We'll start another podcast where agency owners interview me. So thanks very much for that. That's incredible. It's a good bit of advice. I think that kind of try and niche down into either an industry type or a delivery type, and or both, and get the numbers right to start with. If you get the numbers right to start with, you can then kind of on a piece of paper work out whether or not that is viable. If there's only 15 somethings in an area, then you can't do it. You can then extrapolate, you can grow a little bit or something like that.
The only thing I think is a barrier to that, and it's something that we toyed with about 10 years ago, is just understanding what the current audience pays for the sort of service that you think you're going to deliver. So if it was, say, glass manufacturer, how do you know how much the biggest glass manufacturer spends on PPC? Like, is it £2,000 a month? And if so, that's not really the opportunity. So I think there's again, this is all in every textbook I'm sure ever published about business studies or marketing. Like, do your market research, do your audience research, and just try and find out. But a lot of the time we just go, it'll be fine, like we'll just do it and it'll work. But then we've done it before, and you've gone a certain amount of way down the path, and then you realize everyone in this market's got £600 to spend a month, but I need £3,000 and this isn't going to work. So again, that's probably the only caveat, is like, pick your niche and then figure out if actually they can spend what you need to achieve on your bits of paper you just mentioned.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic piece of advice there. So thank you very much for giving that advice. And also thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Absolutely.
Thanks so much for having me. And we'll meet next week, and I'll do it the other way around.
Yes, absolutely. For God's sake, I'm terrified. And on our next podcast, we'll have a different agency leader talking about their journey and the things they've learned along the way. So thanks very much for listening.